Hi, everyone. I'm Amelia.
Hi, and I'm Tom.
And the story we have for you this week's from the Gospel of Mark, the second chapter. Um, it's a story that I don't believe has been in the lectionary, at least it wasn't the last go around. So we're happy to be working on it now. It's a great story. It's actually two stories back to back. Tom will tell it for you, and then we'll talk about it. All right, Tom, take it away.
Okay, here's the story. One Sabbath, he was going through the grain field, and his disciples, as they made their way, began to pluck ears of grain. And the Pharisees said to him, "Hey, look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he was hungry and his companions, and then they were in need of food? He entered the house of God when Abiathar was high priest and ate the bread of the presence, which it is not lawful for anyone but the priests to eat, and gave it to his companions." And he said to them, "The Sabbath was made for humankind, not humankind for the Sabbath. Therefore, the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath." And then he entered the synagogue. And there was a man in the synagogue who had a withered hand. And the Pharisees were watching him to see whether he would heal him on the Sabbath so that they might accuse him. And Jesus said to the man, "Come out into the middle." And then he said to them, "Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to kill?" And he looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart. And then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored. And immediately the Pharisees went out and began to conspire against him with the Herodians, how they might destroy him.
Great, thank you, Tom. When you I was gonna, this is not on my long list of questions to ask, but I'll just have to say, when you put your hand up, where's my, like this, it made me think that you broke two fingers a couple months ago, February. And so we've been looking at your hand a lot and how your fingers been
Oh,
crooked and you're working on getting them
yeah,
restored. So
yeah, that's right.
yeah, so it's a major connections with the story for you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
Okay. So my long list of questions. In this section of Mark, we have these two stories about kind of two different ways, although they're related, that Jesus gets himself in trouble with the Pharisees by doing something that apparently he's not supposed to do on the Sabbath, things that were not lawful, as they said. So this
Right.
raises for me several questions, kind of basic things. So first of all, who are the Pharisees? When was the Sabbath and why was it so special? And what did they mean by saying it's not lawful? So first, who are the Pharisees?
Well, the Pharisees were a group of lay men uh, who were uh, committed to uh, observing the law rigorously, and who practiced daily reflection uh, in the synagogues of the reading of the scriptures and of observance of the Sabbath as a day of rest. And so they were serious about that. I'll read the basis of that.
Basis, yeah, when was the Sabbath exactly for people who?
The Sabbath was Sunday. No, it was Saturday.
I was going to say, yeah, I know that's the Christian Sabbath, but I didn't think that was theirs.
The Sabbath was Saturday. It was the seventh day. And so it was the day of rest. And so the Sabbath law was based on the story of the Lord speaking to Moses. You yourself are to speak to the Israelites, quote, "You shall keep my Sabbath, for this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, given in order that you may know that I, the Lord, sanctify you. You shall keep the Sabbath, because it is holy for you. Everyone who profanes it shall be put to death. Whoever does any work on it shall be cut off from among the people. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is a day of solemn rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day shall be put to death." And then there is in Numbers.
Where was that first passage from that you just read?
Oh, that was from Exodus.
Okay.
Exodus 32, I think it is. Yep. Exodus 31, 12 to 15.
Okay.
And
Numbers.
then in Numbers, there's a story of a man who was gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. And they found him gathering sticks and brought him to Moses, Aaron, and to the whole congregation. And they put him in custody because it was not clear what should be done to him. And the Lord said to Moses, "The man shall be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him outside the camp." So the whole congregation brought him outside the camp and stoned him to death, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. So Sabbath violations of the Sabbath were very serious. And one could be put to death for violating the Sabbath.
Wow.
And that was the law. So the Pharisees were serious about the Sabbath and its observance. And when they began to plot to destroy him, they were fulfilling the law.
Okay. And so just to be real basic, when you talk about the law and when they talk about it's not lawful, we're referring to what?
To the reader, to the law as embodied in the scriptures. So
Okay.
this is from Exodus and Numbers.
Okay.
So those passages then constitute a significant part of the law.
And these
the
were
establishment of Sabbath law.
right. These were the laws that, I mean, Jesus and his disciples would have been seeking to follow as good Jewish men, right?
Right.
Right. Okay. All right. So in the specific issue in this particular case was that the disciples were plucking grain. So first again, just why would they be doing that? And I guess we have a hint from that story about David, but why would they be plucking grain?
Oh, that was, they pluck grain and then, rub it and eat it.
Okay, so
it
they
was
were
bread.
eating it. And why? Because they were hungry. I guess that's what I'm getting. Yeah. And
Right.
then the story about David and his companions when they went to the priest was the same issue. They were hungry in need of food. Yeah.
Right.
And so why was that not lawful? Just to be
Why was it not? Because that constituted work.
plucking the grain constituted
Yes,
work?
harvesting the grain.
Okay.
And rubbing the hands together constituted work.
Wow. Okay. So it wasn't the eating, it wasn't like a food prohibition, it was a work prohibition because it was
That's
a Sabbath.
right.
Okay. All right. Now, let's see. In the second case, with the healing with the man with the withered hand, I mean, do we have some sense of what a withered hand would have been, was, or?
Well, it would have been a hand that had been, crippled in some way. And, we don't know what, but it was not, it didn't work. So his hand was contracted. It was shrunk. It was, something was wrong with his hand. We don't know what exactly.
Okay. And apparently they were watching Jesus to see if he was going to do something about it. And I mean, why was healing unlawful?
It was not unlawful. Indeed, it was encouraged to save life on the Sabbath day. So Jesus' question, is it lawful on the Sabbath day to save life or to kill? And the answer to that was, yes, it is lawful. It is even commanded. But the first question that Jesus asks is it lawful to do good or to do harm? That's an even broader category. And so there would be specifics where it would not be lawful to do good on the Sabbath, but to save life or to kill. So it put the Pharisees in a difficult position in terms of their ruling about the law, because on the one hand, the law forbid working on the Sabbath, but on the other hand, it encouraged to save life or to kill, and Jesus was defining the man's hand as a life and death matter.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but going back to the plucking grain case, it talks about Jesus replies to his critics by referring to something they apparently should have read about with regard to David and Abiathar.
Abiathar,
Right. Okay. So where would they have read this?
Well, they would have read it in the stories of David. I don't have the chapter and verse in front of me.
So, but it's in
the it's interesting
scriptures.
That in the story in Exodus, it's not Abiathar who was high priest when David went into the temple. It was Ahimelech. And so
it wouldn't have been an Exodus, right? Wouldn't David's stories be in?
Oh, that's right. It was in 1 Samuel.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm sorry. Who? It wouldn't have been Abiathar?
No.
Okay.
The story is that he went into the temple when Ahimelech was. So Jesus didn't get his quotation straight.
Well,
or Mark didn't. So they
maybe Mark didn't, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can all make us.
That's one of fun.
Better. Yeah.
Kind of funny thing.
All right, okay. And then what is Jesus implying when he says the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath?
The Son of Man was a representative of humanity. And so the Son of Man represented human interest, human commitment, human life, the human race. And so he is saying that that the law was made for humankind, and that the Son of Man, who is a representative of humankind, was Lord then, even of the Sabbath.
Well, since he's the one who said, apparently told his disciples they could eat, I mean, is he implying that he's the Son of Man or not?
Yes.
Okay.
He is implying that.
Okay. Yeah, so that might not have gone over well with the.
It definitely did not go over well, and was the precedent and what preceded then this major confrontation in the synagogue with the man with the withered hand.
Yeah. Yeah, you and I have watched the Chosen series, and it's interesting because in the Chosen, the synagogue scene comes first, so they've turned that around for some reason. I don't know why, but
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
yeah. Anyway, let's see. So speaking of the synagogue scene, the critics are silent. According to the narrator, they were silent. They were watching him, to see what he was going to do. Apparently, negatively after having gone through this fucking grain thing. But why were they silent, or why do you think
They were silent because there was a conflict between their two citations of the law. On the one hand, the law, commanded doing good to save life
Okay.
on the Sabbath. But then another part of the law forbid any work on the Sabbath.
And
And so,
healing was considered work.
yes.
Okay. Now I guess doctors would would consider it work.
Well, it was ambiguous. So what constituted work? In this case, Jesus didn't do any work. He simply commanded the man to stretch out his hand. He didn't touch him.
Yeah.
He didn't heal him except by saying so. It was the man who did the work of stretching out his hand. So the ambiguities of the law are manifest in this story.
Right.
And both, they were silent because they were caught. They couldn't answer one way or the other.
Yeah. Well, so Jesus actually, before he even says anything, he looks around and we get this inside view of his emotional state. It says he was
Right.
angry. So
right.
why do we
Well, he was angry at their use of the law to keep the man from being made well and for giving the man life. So he was angry at the way in which they were using the law.
So then after the healing, the Pharisees, and it says, I'm going to read this, immediately conspired with the Herodians, new characters suddenly, against him, Jesus, how to destroy him. So, I mean, they were angry too, or
Yes.
anyway, they want to destroy him. That's pretty strong. Why were they so angry? And then who were these Herodians that suddenly show up at the end of the story?
The two stories that I read at the beginning make it clear that the violation of the Sabbath law was punished by death. So the precedents in the Torah were for violations of Sabbath law to be punished by death.
Wow.
And so it appears that the Pharisees and the Herodians were conspiring together to enforce the law, and that they were then began to figure out a way to kill him.
Okay, so who are the Herodians?
The Herodians were supporters of the Herodian dynasty, several members of which ruled various parts of the kingdom of Israel through the end of the first century.
As in King Herod? Is that who we're talking about?
King Herod was the first. And so his sons then were rulers of various parts of Israel throughout the first century.
All right. So my last question then is kind of maybe a little broader.
And one further thing about that is that this may also be a reflection of Mark's telling this story in the context of the post-war situation.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. Okay, go right ahead. Tell us about the post-war context, please.
Well, there were still Herodians in the Israelite community in the aftermath of the war. And
now wait, there were conflicts just a little bit. So you better tell us what war we're talking about, because there were a lot of wars back then.
The Jewish-Roman War from 66 to 73.
Okay.
70 was when the temple was destroyed, and effectively the war was at an end. But the resistance at Masada, that did not end until 73. So in that context, in the aftermath of the war, there was significant controversy between the two Jewish communities that survived the war, the Pharisees, under the leadership of Yohanan ben Zakkai, and the followers of Jesus. So those two communities then appealed to the Jews in the world, and specifically in the diaspora, the areas of the Greco-Roman Empire. So they would then, those communities were in conflict about significant dimensions of the observance of the law, about what it meant to be a Jew, so on. So they agreed about nonviolence. I think it's important to notice that the Pharisees were nonviolent, as were the followers of Jesus, over against the zealots who had carried out the war and who were continuing to conspire to reignite the war and to try to drive out the Romans.
Okay, well, any final words that you have for the folks who are watching this?
Well, this is an instance of appeals on the part of Mark, the storyteller of Jesus, to make specific and concrete the issues around Jesus as the Messiah. And so this is an instance of Jesus arguing for the law, that is the law of life, to be given priority over the specifics of the enforcement of Sabbath law. So it is it's a significant story about Jesus' advocacy for a particular interpretation of the law.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Applicable today as well, I think.
Well, those issues remain.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you everybody so much for watching. Have a wonderful week. If you're watching this in 2024, we're coming to you on the day before Memorial Day. It's a day when we honor and remember people who've died as a result of being in the armed forces in our country. And whether or not we're keen on waging war as a very appropriate thing for Christians to be doing, we do honor those who have done that and have died in that service. So I think you want to say goodbye, Tom.
There's a lot more to be said about it.
Yeah, there is. There's always more to be said. So, all right. God bless you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.